the First. I'm Nichelle Poston along with Shirley Min and Mark Eichman. A milestone at the University of Delaware campus as the tower on the Star campus is one step closer to completion and the campus becoming a high-tech research hub.
U.S. Senator Chris Coons believes Delaware has a role in that tech future. He also reflects on the turbulent times in Washington, D.C. and the Trump White House.
Support for Confederate symbols fueled some of that turbulence, and we revisit one of our stories on Delaware's fractured connection to both the North and the South during the Civil War. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
The University of Delaware Star Campus continues to grow into a state-of-the-art operation for the school and community partners. So much so, it's hard to remember what it looked like as the old Chrysler plant. And this week's First Look will take you on site where new structures are being built and existing ones are running out of space. This is one of many laboratories you'll find on University of Delaware's Science, Technology, and Advanced Research Campus. The focus inside this lab are the ingredients often found in some of your cosmetic products.
What we do here is help cosmetic companies and pharmaceutical companies and companies that make the ingredients that go into those products. We make them feel the way they should for the consumer so that they get all excited.
Chandler and his team work with big companies like Glasso, Pfizer, and Estee Lauder. But to do more research like what you see here, the Star Campus will need to offer more space. And this 150,000-foot structure just may be the answer.
So in the tower, what we will be doing is really expanding the research that we currently have. We have run out of space, so over to one side near the towers are trailers that we have a lot of our faculty in that we had to move them into because we ran out of space.
The Star Tower will also house a relatively new speech graduate program.
But I like to think about this new building as really being built on a theme and a focus on prevention and wellness, and it's all about the science of health and really understanding how do we live healthier lives, and living healthier lives depends on the social determinants of health, which is our environment, which is our behavior, which is how we eat, how much we move, all of those types of things.
Once the building is completed, you'll also find non-traditional classroom space similar to a room like this, creating a virtual reality for those in need of physical therapy.
Our physical therapy program is #1 in the nation. So it's about rehab, and so it really is about helping individuals sort of live better.
In this particular room, they're taking a look at how sensory information is processed.
So that's kind of the goal of this lab, is to understand sensory processing and how that drives motor output. So when you're walking or standing, how we use our eyes, the balance system in our ears, and our muscles to kind of position our body in space.
Fascinated with the technology, the treadmill was hard to resist, even for myself.
For the first look that we had, you have nothing to be worried about, but yeah, I will practice a little bit more balance for sure.
In 2009, UD purchased the Chrysler plant, creating the Star Campus, and Bloom Energy became one of the first tenants.
So we wanted to build a factory that's very close to our customer base. So that narrowed it down to the northeastern states. As you would expect, most of the states wanted us to be there in their state. But at the end of the day, it was about leadership.
That leadership included the Markell administration and UD officials. Eventually, the College of Health Sciences also relocated to the site, and new plans now include train station improvements.
It's going to be amazing, and imagine with the train station, the New Arc Regional Transportation Center.
Although there's a lot to see now, officials say of the 272 acres, only 10% of the Star Campus is occupied, leaving plenty of room for growth.
The Star Campus is the field of dreams. It is the place where the needs of society drive our education, our research, and our engagement with society so that we can basically build better solutions for a better tomorrow. So we're so excited about the Star Campus here at the University of Delaware and everything that it brings for our people, our students, and our state of Delaware.
On Tuesday, University of Delaware leaders hosted a topping-off ceremony where officials signed the final beam of the structure. Construction crews then took that beam and put it in place, marking the end of the structural phase.
So, Michelle, you mentioned the Star Tower means more space for the College of Health Sciences. Is that college going to take up the whole building?
Actually, no. The university will only occupy floors 2 through 7. As for floors 8 through 10, they'll be leased to companies with a focus on science and technology. The first floor will be left for food services.
Sounds good. And when will the building be open? When's the project finished?
Okay, well, if everything goes well, Mark, with construction, the new tower will open by August of next year.
All right. Thanks so much, Michelle. And we'll continue to report on the progress at the Star campus. Follow our reporting at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, art as told through one family story and a connection to the creation of the nation of India 70 years ago is our first experience this week. And we'll end with the fun of the solar eclipse all around Delaware, and you don't need special glasses to watch. Stay with us. First person this week is Senator Chris Coons. Thanks so much, Senator, for stopping by today.
Great to be with you.
I want to start with Afghanistan and, your reaction to the president's plan of sending several thousand more troops to the country.
Well, President Trump faced the same situation that President Obama did when he came into office. He ran for president saying he wanted to get out of Afghanistan, that he saw it as a war without end and as a war without good options. And then after weeks of meeting with his national security team and generals with deep experience in Afghanistan, like his predecessor, he came out instead suggesting that we extend our engagement in Afghanistan and we increase our troop strength. A key difference here is that President Trump is adding a few thousand troops. Currently, we have about 8,000 American troops in Afghanistan. He'll add 3,000 or 4,000 more. President Obama surged our troop strength to almost 100,000. I don't see how adding a few thousand troops is going to significantly change the facts on the ground. And I think it's important we focus on what President Trump's strategy really is. It's to stay in Afghanistan as long as is needed to persuade the Taliban that they need to negotiate with us, and to not leave until we are certain that the Afghan government and its armed forces can contain the Taliban and control the country. I agree with him that in Afghanistan, that is a lawless country and is controlled by terrorists, is a very bad thing, would be a very bad thing for the United States, the region, and the world. But I think we need to have an honest conversation with the American people about just how long a conflict this may be, because I think the Taliban can outwait us for decades.
The president's call, though, to kind of erase that timeline, he changed his tune there.
That's right. He's changing from a timeline-based strategy to a conditions-on-the-ground strategy, and I think that's fine. I do think that in the Senate, we need to have a more detailed debate about exactly how this is going to play out, whether we're willing to bear the costs, and exactly how he's going to succeed in bringing Pakistan to our side and have them stop harboring terrorists, something that his predecessor worked very hard on as well.
During his presentation of that plan, what did you think about the way he presented it? Did you feel it was presidential?
This was a more focused speech for the president. He stayed on script. He stayed on message. I appreciated that he began with a call to national unity and rejection of hate and bigotry, and that he, at several points in the speech, thanked and recognized the sacrifices of our men and women in the armed forces. Roughly 2,300 Americans have died in Afghanistan in the 16 years of conflict so far, and we have dozens of allied nations that are also serving and sacrificing in Afghanistan. I thought the president's overall tone was fairly long on rhetoric and, sort of insisting we will win and we will achieve victory, and pretty short on details on exactly what we're going to do. I recognize that he may want to deliver the details of strategy in classified briefings rather than in a speech, but we need to have more details about exactly how we're going to succeed in Afghanistan.
Well, that said, that call for unity during that more measured speech, then a day later in Arizona at a rally, it almost seemed it was barbed, it seemed angry and divisive. So what do you think happened there? What changed there in, a 24-hour time time span?
I think over the months that he's been president, there is a pattern where the president, when he sticks to the remarks prepared for him by his staff and aides, is capable of being more measured, more presidential, of staying to the topic. When he goes to a campaign rally setup where he just speaks impromptu and responds to the crowd, and where that crowd is his core political base, he tends to go off the rails quite a bit more. I found
who's the real Trump then?
Well, I'm hopeful that as president, he will spend more of his time focusing on the real challenges facing our country, coming to the center with things like a workable strategy for Afghanistan, or a way for us to move forward, whether it's on the budget and spending, whether it's on confronting unresolved national challenges like education, infrastructure, immigration, job creation. There is a path forward for him as a centrist president, but he so far hasn't taken it.
Okay. But based on what you've seen so far, you do see there's potential?
Look, in order to be able to get on a train early in the morning and go to Washington, I have to remain optimistic. I think the president has a number of very capable national security advisors around him, and I'm insisting on being hopeful that we'll find a way forward together. I found his speech in Phoenix very troubling. The suggestion that he might pardon Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who's been held in contempt by a federal judge for violating a court order about racial profiling, is just a reminder that some of his instincts on the campaign trail really find the face of the core values of the American people.
I want to touch on Russia briefly. You and North Carolina Republican Senator Tom Tillis drafted some legislation to protect Robert Mueller from being fired. Now, Mueller is a special counsel leading the Trump campaign Russia probe, as you know. Was he in danger of being fired?
Well, President Trump made a whole series of aggressive or threatening or belittling tweets about his close friend and ally, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, about Bob Mueller and about the investigation. He has consistently dismissed the ongoing investigation as a witch hunt and something that has no substance to it. And he had expressly said that any investigation into his personal finances, the Trump organization, was a red line. And I think it has been publicly reported now that Bob Mueller has impaneled a grand jury and is seeking documents, evidence, witnesses about issues that relate to financial dealings with Russians by the Trump organization. So those facts were enough to lead Senator Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, to come to me and say, let's introduce a bill together. The bill simply provides for a remedy if Bob Mueller, who I'll remind you is one of the most respected, most seasoned senior federal law enforcement leaders, former FBI director, a Republican, nominated by a Republican. Senator Tillis and I introduced a bill that would give him a judicial remedy for reinstatement if he was fired without cause.
It's introduced now. Where does it go, or where is it right now?
It's been introduced. Senator Tillis and I have spoken to the chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, who are considering joining us as co-sponsors. We would need to get a hearing in the committee in September. The committee will be quite busy because we have a number of hearings that relate to the ongoing Russia investigation as well.
Another piece of fallout from the Charlottesville white supremacist rally and the counter-protest was the dismantling of that business leaders panel. You know, a lot of CEOs jumping ship. Is that a missed opportunity now that we don't have that panel there?
There are actually 3 different panels that have been disbanded. And I think, in particular, manufacturing has been a priority, an area of focus and interest for me. And the one that was there to advise the president on how to strengthen and expand job growth in American manufacturing had some really seasoned, capable senior business leaders on it. I do think that's a lost opportunity. I have 2 bipartisan bills that relate to manufacturing. I actually had dinner with Kellyanne Conway right before we went out for the August recess to talk to her about it. I met with the head of legislative affairs from the White House to talk to him about it. I've been trying to get interest from the administration in bipartisan legislation around manufacturing. And I think without ongoing advice and engagement from business leaders who tend to be more centrist than ideological, the Trump administration is less likely to make real progress on manufacturing.
So are you optimistic or pessimistic then that there will be federal resources in any sort of upcoming budget debate for any manufacturing initiatives?
Well, I'm on the Appropriations Subcommittee for the Commerce Department, which is where much of manufacturing work goes. To me, one of the more concerning pieces of the president's budget proposal this year was the complete elimination of a valuable program called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. It's only $130 million a year. It's in every state, all 50 states. It's got a demonstrated record of high impact, and it's done very well for small and medium manufacturers here in Delaware. On a bipartisan basis, in the markup of that subcommittee, we rejected those cuts. And so I expect in September, when we get back, the full Appropriations Committee will insist going forward on full budget support for a number of manufacturing programs, the MEP being not the least of them.
Okay, now, as someone who's not running for office in 2018,
Right.
what kind of election cycle do you predict it's going to be?
I think it'll be wild. The president went to Phoenix, Arizona, and fairly directly confronted Republican Senator Jeff Flake, who is an incumbent. Mitch McConnell, the Republican Majority Leader, is committed to defending Senator Flake. Senator Flake is someone I've legislated with, I've traveled with, and I'm struck at the division between President Trump, who is supporting primary challengers to a number of incumbent senators, and Republican senators running for re-election. Because of the way cycles work in the Senate, we have 6-year terms. 2018, the map is particularly tough for Democrats because 2012, 6 years ago, was a particularly good cycle for Democrats. So we have 5 particularly vulnerable Democratic incumbents. They're going to be running in an environment where President Trump is also out there campaigning regularly, and I think it's very hard to predict how this is going to play out.
Real quick, you've become a favorite go-to for several of the cable shows. You do the interviews, here out of our studios. Do you like doing those sorts of quick hitter interviews?
I like having the opportunity to speak to a very wide range of issues, and being on the Judiciary Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee has given me the opportunity to speak to a lot of issues facing our country today.
Do you find that there's a different tone to the interviews that you're doing for Fox News Channel as opposed to, say, CNN?
Yes, there are some noticeable differences in the tempo and tone and direction. I really enjoy a chance to be on Fox regularly. I've gone on a number of conservative talk radio shows. I try to be a voice of reason and to bring some balance and some sort of measured dialogue to what I think has been a fairly tumultuous 8 months so far.
Yeah, a little exhausting too. Thank you so much, Senator Coons. We covered a lot. We appreciate your time. Delaware Senator Chris Coons, thanks so much again.
Thank you, Sue.
Did you tune in during the middle of that interview? Go to WHYY.org/first to watch first when you want. Past shows are there too. If you want to listen to WHYY FM on your phone, then check out the new WHYY Listen app.
In the aftermath of the events in Charlottesville, Virginia earlier this month, Delaware Governor John Carney has suggested that the Confederate flag should never fly on public property in the state. Delaware's connections to the South during the Civil War has been well documented. In 2013, we took a look at that connection for the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. Here's what we found.
At this stage of the war, this is 1863, the strength of the 1st and 2nd Delaware was about 250 men. So already they had lost about 3/4 of their men in these other battles.
Despite the dwindled numbers, Delaware soldiers saw battle action almost immediately.
Once they arrived in Gettysburg on the 2nd of July, 1st and 2nd Delaware were thrown into the battle pretty significantly, almost immediately.
After a long delay, their efforts have finally been memorialized on the battlefield with a monument erected in the year 2000 after a decades-long political fight.
They suffered considerable losses. 2nd Delaware at Gettysburg lost about 80 of their 250 men. The first Delaware lost about 75. So we're talking about 30 to 35% of both regiments were killed, wounded, or captured during Gettysburg.
After the battle, Delaware played host to thousands of Confederate prisoners.
Within a week after Gettysburg, prisoners started to arrive, and there were extra barracks that were hastily constructed for them. And by the end of August, there were almost 11,000 prisoners here, which was by far the largest population here.
Number 137, fire!
It was originally designed to defend the Delaware River, but with no real Southern naval threat, Fort Delaware was transformed into a prison.
The barracks were supposedly built for 10,000 prisoners, so it was definitely over capacity at that point. It definitely was the worst time to be here because of the crowding. You can imagine ships pulling up with thousands of prisoners per day.
Over the length of the war, about 33,000 prisoners were incarcerated at Fort Delaware. During that roughly 3 to 4 year period, about 2,500 of those prisoners died from various diseases.
While Delaware remained a part of the Union, there were plenty of locals who sympathized with the South.
It was an interesting dichotomy out here because there were people in Delaware City that were very loyal to the federal government, and then there were those that were suspected of being Copperheads. So being where Delaware was, straddling the Mason-Dixon line, often you didn't know who you could trust.
There were no Delaware Confederate units. There weren't because there weren't enough Delawareans to form a unit. So they were spread out in Virginia, Maryland, Mississippi, but some of them were part of Robert E. Lee's army of Northern Virginia. So they were at Gettysburg. And we know at least 5 who were captured and ended up at Fort Delaware.
After the war, Fort Delaware emptied. Good news for the prisoners, but not for the local economy.
This was a moneymaker for people, you know, when you think in terms of how much beef, coal, you know, all other supplies that they had purchased. So, you know, the height of the fort was definitely the Civil War, and once that ended, it was garrisoned by a very small crew at that point.
Today, Fort Delaware stands as a living history destination with period reenactors creating a picture of what life was like at the fort during the Civil War. Tom Ryan has written extensively about the war and Delaware's involvement. He writes a twice-a-month column in the Coastal Point. He's also a Gettysburg Civil War Roundtable 2016 Distinguished Book Award winner. His book is titled Spies, Scouts, and Secrets in the Gettysburg Campaign.
We all tell stories about our lives, our experiences, and our families. Yolanda Chetwynd is the Delaware Division of the Arts Masters Fellow in Painting Award winner for 2017. Through her art, Yolanda wanted to tell the very personal story of the survival of her husband's family. We visited Yolanda's Newark studio to see the work. It's our first experience this week.
My name is Yolanda Chetwynd. I'm a painter. This work is about my husband's family who were caught up in the partitioning of India into India and Pakistan in 1947. So at that time, a lot of Muslims were killing Hindus, and then in India, a lot of Hindus were killing Muslims. As that was happening, people were obviously terrified and frightened for their life, and so there was this migration of about 22 million people. My husband's family was caught up in that. The Hindus were influenced by Muslim culture for over 1,000 years. So that's why I decided to use the shaped panels. So the shaped panels are meant to kind of have the feeling of mosques or a skyline of mosques, and then the story is told within that, or within that history. It starts off in a tranquil place on the Ingles Valley, and then in the second picture, when my mother-in-law, she was pregnant with her first child, and a neighbor came rushing to warn her that they were coming to kill her. She was actually on a swing, and she remembers the story. She jumped off the swing and she hid behind the house. My husband's oldest sister, Mira, was the child from that. So she was born 5 days after partitioning, and then they left very soon after that. I don't think I'm painting these things as depressing. I think I'm painting these things as joyful, because what happened to my husband's family is they survived, and all of those children have gone on to lead lives and have grandchildren, and we ended up in America. We have this wonderful life here. Hopefully we want to keep that open for everybody. I always hope that people take compassion for understanding another culture, another way of thinking about things, and that they have sympathy and empathy. This is why I chose the subject. When I'm painting Mira, my sister-in-law, as a baby fleeing, I'm also thinking about the echoes of my mother during World War II and how she had to flee because she was Jewish. But then I'm also thinking about the Syrian refugees, and we know there's a lot of horrible things that are going on in the world. I think the only thing that counterbalances that is kindness. When people are kind to each other, when they reach out and help each other, that is the thing that heals. That is why people survive.
You can see Yolanda's family story of migration exhibit at the Mezzanine Gallery in the Carville office building in Wilmington from September 1st through the 29th. You can get more information on the web at arts.delaware.gov.
And next week on First, we travel to the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. Those connected with the wall have a new education program about the war. And Delaware veterans play a part in the program as well. And to complete our conversations with Delaware's congressional delegation, Senator Tom Carper joins us.
We'll also have a conversation about a Wilmington event coming up in a couple of weeks. The goal, to teach neighborhood leaders how to deal with the city's violence issues. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min and Nichelle Polston, I'm Mark Eichman. Have a great week.
We're going to leave you with some of the fun had by people around the area when the eclipse came through on Monday. Enjoy.
We were expecting a couple hundred, but when it went national this week, things kind of blew up, so we're really excited for this turnout. We have about 500 people at least here today, so big crowd. We're excited to have everybody out. This is the first one since 1918 that you've been able to see widespread across all the states. So we wanted to bring families out, have them learn about the eclipse, have them play fun games and activities, and join in the fun.
I knew I wasn't going to be traveling, and I thought, since Brandywine Creek State Park is so receptive to anything like this, they are always gung-ho. I stopped in and said, guess what? There's going to be an eclipse. And then they said, okay, let's do it.
It's something that's unique, and for kids, it's a great experience for them to come out and see what's happening. They may not think much of it now, but in 20 years from now, they'll say, hey, I remember going and seeing the eclipse, especially if they go look at the telescopes and that type thing.
It looks like there's a fingernail up there. There's no sun.
It was pretty amazing. Just watching as the time progressed and it got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then seeing how the weather changed and it got cooler.
That's pretty cool. And yeah, it was right on target to what we expected. And I think a lot of folks just had a good time coming together for it. I heard a few people say, well, it's kind of combines physical and spiritual. That's neat. And one person said, it's day and night coming together for the first time. So I like that. I like that a lot.